Is your relationship a trauma bond? Now, there are many types of trauma bonds and other definitions, but this is the most common and the most painful one, which is the anxious and the avoidant attachment. And what this is two people who have childhood trauma and wounding developing an insecure attachment. One goes anxious, one goes avoidant later on in life. And they match together like a positive and negative charge. We'll talk more about why that is. And what happens is that they will fight into the end of time to try to get their needs met, and fail and feel impossible to get those needs met, and feel impossible, and it will feel impossible for them to give the other person the needs. Whether they receive it or give it, it feels impossible. And they will fight, break up, get divorced, and repeat it with another partnership. And so the funny thing, for example, that the anxious is that the more that they need communication, reassurance, intimacy, the more it triggers the pain of the avoidant, and they get scared. They get scared of losing their freedom, their independence. They get scared of being vulnerable. All those things happen, and they start to, keyword, avoid, right? Well, guess what that does? The more that they do that, the more it makes the anxious person anxious, and they get more scared. Well, what does the anxious person do when they're more scared? They try harder. They push harder to get the closeness, and the avoidant runs away even more. So the very things that they do to soothe themselves hurts the other person, touches the other person's deep childhood wounds, and we'll dive into that right now. Common thought patterns of someone that is anxious is, don't leave me. This is my only chance at love. For the avoidant, it is, I feel trapped. I can find better, right? Using excuses to run away, essentially. And for the anxious, their core traits are fear of abandonment, constant need for communication, like lots of texting, talking, and so on, right? They want that reassurance, so they want constant communication. They hate being alone, can be extremely jealous, and very hypervigilant. So always basically hyper attuned to if the avoidant changes their behavior, changes their tone, changes their expression. They're quick to jump on it fast and try to fix it and correct it to avoid, again, abandonment. That's why the hypervigilance is so strong. It is trying to protect themselves. And of course, very low self-worth, because you only fear abandonment because you feel that love can be taken away at any moment because you don't feel lovable for it to stay, okay? Now, the avoidant has a deep fear of being controlled and suffocated. They have difficulty showing emotions because showing emotions is associated with pain growing up, sensitive to criticism, withdrawals when overwhelmed, quick to find reasons to leave, right? Will rationalize why they should leave, right? Really, they're avoiding the emotional pains of what the anxious person is stirring up inside them, but they will rationalize and make up excuses like, oh, I can find someone better. Or they'll fantasize about an ex. Or they'll fantasize about an ideal partner, like, oh, the next one's gonna be so much better, right? And unfortunately, they just run away into another relationship and they repeat this dynamic regardless, right? So they run away, but it doesn't actually work. They also have low self-worth, right? Which is interesting because they both have low self-worth. And we'll talk about that in a bit, but the sensitivity to criticism means the low self-worth is already there to begin with. The fear of being vulnerable, sharing emotions, right? There's negative associations like I'm going to be punished, I'm going to be attacked. There's pain associated with these things. So why are they the way they are, right? So the childhood of someone that's anxious, they grew up with unstable, unavailable parents, right? Physically unavailable, emotionally unavailable. They weren't there for them when they needed them. Maybe there's a divorce. Maybe it's a father that's constantly working and emotionally numb at home. All kinds of emotional abandonment is happening that causes that pain. There could also be simply straight up neglect. Maybe they're around, but like I said before, emotionally not present, not attuned to their needs as a child, left alone a lot. And there can also be abuse in the household. The childhood of someone that has avoidant attachment, they were forced to put their parents' needs above their own, right? Or siblings, right? So they experience a self-abandonment, which is why they're so scared of intimacy, because intimacy means, oh, I'm going to have someone else's needs are going to override my own, and I'm going to suffer from that, right? Controlling and critical behaviors. If parents were controlling and critical, they robbed the child of their autonomy to make choices, express themselves, and critical parents also robs the child of their sense of self-esteem and self-worth, right? Always pointing out mistakes, always being harsh, and then pulling love away. This also ties into shame for showing emotion, showing weakness, showing vulnerability. Maybe you're ashamed for it, criticized for it, punished for it in some way, right? Something negative is associated with the vulnerability aspect. And when they experience that as a child, they never learn how to deal with that pain. They carry it into adulthood, and all they do is try to cope with it, right? So they cope with the pain. Both of them are coping with this unresolved childhood pain that's embedded in the nervous system and subconscious. So, interesting, right? Because their behaviors trigger the hell out of each other, and yet they are magnetically attracted to each other like a positive and negative charge, right? Confusing, right? Why are they even attracted to begin with? Well, all attraction comes down to, number one, familiarity. We are drawn to what's familiar. So that's a childhood environment, right? This is our first concept of what love should look like. And so we go to what's familiar, even if it's painful. That's why you might hear sometimes when you find magnetic attraction to someone and you start to be with them and date them, it almost feels like home. Well, because it does remind you of your home, right? And number two is subconsciously get the childhood need, right? Subconsciously get the childhood need from the very person that you could not get it from. Maybe it's the father that was always not around, and you're craving the love and validation that you didn't get from him, and you're trying to do it through your partners, right? Or for the avoidant, it is subconsciously getting the acknowledgement and acceptance from the mother. Or for the avoidant, it is trying to subconsciously get the love, acceptance, and given the space needed that they could not get from their mother that was controlling and critical. So they're really both using each other to soothe old childhood pains. Well, you might have already experienced that this doesn't work out too well at all. In fact, it gets you the opposite, doesn't it, right? The more that they try to get their needs from the other person as an attempt to soothe the childhood wounds, the more it recreates the very pain that they don't want, right? And it keeps going and going. So, most importantly, how do we change? How do we heal and not repeat this dynamic over and over, right? The thing is, when it comes to this stuff here, talk therapy and most conventional types of relationship advice, mindset coaching, books, affirmations, all that kind of surface level stuff will not work for attachment issues, which are deeply embedded childhood issues. In order for change to happen, we have to go deep into the nervous system and do somatic nervous system work, which is really retraining the fight or flight response that is stored and remembered in the body and also in the subconscious. Number two, you have to reprogram the subconscious, right? Which is basically reparenting the inner child. For both the anxious and the avoidant, there's a deep belief for the anxious that they can be abandoned, right? That is a programmed belief as a way to adapt to trauma. For the avoidant, they have a deep fear of being controlled and suffocated. Again, a deep adaptation to cope with trauma. Again, the self-worth wounds, learned and experienced from childhood that is deeply embedded in the nervous system and subconscious, is no longer simply a rational thing. So both of you have to work with the body and the subconscious. Now, the subconscious reprogramming does not work unless you have the synergy with the body and nervous system. If you do not have a connection to the body and you do not do the work to retrain the fight or flight response, the mind, the rational mind, will block access to the subconscious, and you will not be able to reprogram it. You can go through the words and the thoughts, but nothing is going to hit. So these two work together. The last bit is the ecosystem. Imagine going to the gym for the first time. You go there by yourself, no skills, no training, no support, and you just start throwing weights around. You're going to end up getting very stuck, make very minimal progress, get overwhelmed, injure yourself, give up, right? You need to be in an ecosystem to follow a training protocol by people obviously that you trust and feel safe with, but also be immersed socially by other people doing the work right alongside you, right? So imagine going to the gym by yourself, No help, no support, no trainer, no friends. Imagine going to the gym and you had friends by your side. You're all following the same program, the same training. You're getting help whenever you get stuck. You're having your form corrected. You're having motivation, pushing you forward. That's going to create massive momentum that normally by yourself, you're going to drop off, get stuck, get lost, hurt yourself, and so on and so forth. So an ecosystem is what it takes to make deep change, especially the change that is as deeply embedded and difficult to access inside the body and subconscious. If you want to know more about how I help people break these attachment patterns and heal the deep childhood traumas that created them, visit my page for more, and I'll see you on the other side.